Okay, Q&A for as long as, Jerry, until you call it.
You told us the who, the why, how, what. Appreciate that. But there is significant law and declaration that says it is not only our right when the government becomes in power, it is our duty to overthrow that government. At what point, what is the trigger point at which this happens?
Well, Thomas Jefferson actually said that. He actually said that it was a responsibility to overthrow a tyrannical government. And I think that I get asked the question all the time. And here's what I would say to you. I have said previously that I thought that the flashpoint for America was when the government tries to confiscate guns. And that is why I'm very concerned about what's happening in the nation today, because I am really seeing a lot of people. I mean, why can't you buy ammunition? It's not because the government has restricted it, it's because people are buying it when it comes off the truck. And I think that this is a very, very dangerous thing that is happening with this government, I'll say, efforts to restrict our Second Amendment rights. I think that's it. Now, I think the Founding Fathers gave us what we need. They gave us the right to vote. They gave us all the things we need to make a difference in this country today. If you're asking me at what point do we rise up, grab our AR-15s, and take to the streets, I would tell you that I have no answer for that. I cannot tell you that. That is something that each of us has to listen to our own conscience, and I don't advocate it. I, for one, am doing all I can in the areas that I have influence to do what is right with regards to trying to make a difference in this country. But I have no intentions nor plans to take up arms and fight against the government. Now, if they try to confiscate my weapons, let me tell you that I will most likely become a fugitive. I will not surrender my weapons. And that is what I'm most concerned about. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask you, when I was
Wait for the mic here.
when I was in the military, and this is going back to the 50s and the old life jacket, brown boot, I believe it was, and they had movies that we had to go to that basically talked a little bit about what you were talking about on communism, takeover.
Yeah.
And I know when I was in Vietnam, that was taboo. They never talked about any of it.
Right.
And they also noticed that the religion was held back while we were there. I mean, they had chaplains, but they weren't preaching the way they used to. And this is just my part on it. And about you talking about not leaving anybody behind, that really hit me, because it is true. It's hard to leave a guy behind. We'll see you later.
Well, you covered a couple of subjects there, but first of all, you won't find much emphasis or focus now on communism, Marxism, in any of our training in the military. You'll find an awful lot on tolerance and that kind of thing, but equal opportunity and so forth, but you don't find much on it. And I remember even when I was in ROTC, we still had those same things.
I got a grandson graduating from DMI this summer, and I know things he's been told so far. He's a lieutenant. Yeah, I mean, what he's not, you know, it's been held back. Things they aren't allowed to speak anymore.
I'm very concerned about our military. I'm concerned about the social experiments that are occurring at a time when our military is under the greatest stress that it's ever been under. Been at war for 11 years, and it's just incredible that we would, do all this social engineering in our military at a time when we need to be coming around them and looking for how we can help them and what will increase their readiness. And there's just too many social experiments going on. And with regard to Benghazi, I don't know how many of you know it, but I've been working extensively with Congressman Wolf, one of our own. Wolf is passionate about getting accountability on this, but look, my focus is not why Susan Rice went on television and said it was a response to some knucklehead video. I mean, everybody in America knew that was not true. What I want to know is, why didn't we go after them? Why didn't we try to save them? And then if we couldn't save them, why didn't we bring their bodies home? See, on the 10th of March, 1864, William Tecumseh Sherman wrote a letter to Ulysses S. Grant, and he said this. He said, I knew wherever I was that you thought of me, and that if I got in a tight spot, you would come, if alive. That was articulating an American value. And that value was violated in Benghazi, and somebody has got to be taken to task and held accountable for it. So why we didn't save those people, or at least bring their bodies home, and not let them fall into Libyan hands, and that's what we did. So I'm passionate about it. Yes, sir. General.
As a retired SF and with a son that's retired from the Army and a son retired from the Navy, we're real concerned if worse scenarios come, can we depend on the leadership in our military to back the Constitution as opposed to backing the leader that they have?
If you'd asked me that 3 years ago, I would have told you that absolutely they'll back the Constitution. I'll be honest, and this will probably get me in trouble too, but I'm concerned about the leadership of our military today that has been so willing to do things that I know these people, I know most of them. They don't believe that this is going to enhance the readiness of the Army, the things that they're doing. They don't believe that the sequestration cuts are going to be in any way anything other than devastating to our military. They don't believe that. But I haven't seen one yet that walked in and took those stars off and laid them on the desk of the President or the Secretary of Defense and said, I cannot support this, I'm out of here, and I will tell the press exactly why I'm leaving. That's what's going to happen right now. Harold K. Johnson, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army, in his memoirs said his greatest regret was when Lyndon Johnson would not activate the Guard and Reserves for Vietnam. He went over to the White House, got out of his sedan, and was going up to tell the President he was resigning, and he was going to the media and tell him why he was resigning. He got out of his car, and he had a change of heart, got back in and went back to the Pentagon, and he said, I live to regret it. He said, I should have resigned. That's what needs to happen right now. Some of these people need to resign, because I know these people. I know what's in their heart. But as far as I'm concerned, they have not shown any leadership. So I don't know where they'll come down, I guess is the bottom line. I don't know where they'll come down because of what they've already done and allowed to happen to our military.
General, our current and former Secretary of State both said we should forget about Benghazi. We had more important things to think about. And you talk about Representative Wolf trying to get to the bottom of it, but we have an entire Republican Party that most Tea Party people have lost faith in, and rightfully so. Where is the Republican Party in calling for, whether it's impeachment, investigations, or just screaming and yelling from the pulpits? Nothing's happening. They're sitting there with their thumb up their butts and letting this happen. And so we have no one to turn to. A handful of Tea Party people that are, like you said, are trying to be co-opted at every turn. We have very little we can turn to in the U.S. government now that we can have faith in.
It's the most puzzling thing I've ever seen. I've been over to talk to Boehner, and he didn't even show up. Frank Wolf took me over to see Boehner, and me and Fred Thompson, you know, the former senator from Tennessee, we went over to see Boehner, and he didn't even show up. He won't talk to us about it. He sent his staff to talk to us. I've been over on the Hill several times on this issue. They won't talk about it. Now, it may unfold here very quickly. And I don't know if you saw this, but we put so much pressure on them. You know, we put a letter out that got 700 special operations people from all the services assigned us. Those were retired or former special operations, and that's what we spend our lives doing. Preparing for and executing operations to rescue Americans, to bring them home. So we got them to sign it, and of course we sent it to every member of the House of Representatives. So finally I was told the other day that it's about to blow up. Now, I don't know if you saw it, but ISA, Representative ISA, California, sent a message over to the folks at the CIA and said, you better lawyer up. Because we're going to have another war. So I think it's not over. It's not dead.
Yes, sir. Years ago, a long time ago, J. Edgar Hoover wrote a book, Masters of Deceit, talked about the communist plot. I haven't read the book, but I don't know if you've read that, and then also they did a movie about Hoover a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, I think. Leonardo DiCaprio was, I think, maybe the star. But have you seen either of these? I mean, have you seen the movie, or any comment on J. Edgar Hoover and his work?
No, but
I was pretty young.
I've studied J. Edgar Hoover a little bit, and Hoover, at the end of the day, Hoover was a devious man, but he was very much anti-communist. And at that time, I think the FBI did a pretty good job of helping to protect the nation against communists. I cannot say that about the current FBI director, Robert Mueller. And one of the reasons is because he has absolutely refused to see the existential nature of the threat that radical Islam presents in America. He's unwilling to face it. And he is the one, and Steve Lambert can tell you better than I can, but he's the one that actually allowed several Muslim groups to force him to expunge over 1,000 pages from the training curriculum for FBI agents on Islamic terrorism.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Oh, by the way, the guy that was involved in that too is the guy that's the new nominee for Labor Secretary, a guy named Perez, was part of that whole thing. So in Hoover's day, I think he did a respectable job of protecting us from the communist threat, but today I don't see that happening with regards to either the communist threat or the Islamic threat. And by the way, keep in mind, Robert Mueller was appointed by George W. Bush. He wasn't appointed by this administration. It was the last one.
Sir, thank you for your talk today. Greatly appreciated it. You mentioned a lot of wonderful points about things that are going on ideologically, and things, concrete steps that we can do as a community by voting and getting involved. With a war of this type, though, there's the ideological side, and then of course we also know there's the beans and bullets side. We've addressed a little bit of the weapons issue of the bullets. But what about the beans part of it? I'm seeing some things going on with organizations and rural councils and farming that are very much reflecting back in history to what happened to Russia. I do have concerns about our food supply and about how we sustain ourselves locally as communities and wrap around each other. Do you have any suggestions for us, sir?
Yeah, go to the website, what is that website? Food Supplies or something like that? What is it?
Food insurance.
Food insurance.
Yes, sir.
I was down there looking for a box of books today and I couldn't find them because of all the boxes of food insurance that my wife got sent me. Okay, no, I mean, ask Luke that came with me. I couldn't even find the books. Listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a realist, I think. I have about 6 months worth of food in my basement, and I will just tell you, I got a truckload of guns and ammunition. And in fact, on my way over here, I stopped and bought some more at my brother's gun shop. I intend to survive. This is not about, I'm not going out here and start a revolution, but I intend to survive. And if we have an economic collapse, which is the most probable scenario, I intend to survive. And my wife and some of my neighbors. So I strongly suggest you have food and water and ammunition as the bare minimum. And then you think through the other things like the generator and so forth. But I've got all that in my basement. I'm gonna live. I don't give up.
Sir, would you have any suggestions for breaking through the apathy the American people seem to have about studying their Constitution?
Yeah, you know, 2 weekends ago, I was out in Phoenix with Governor Huckabee and Congressman Allen West. And we actually had some people from Hollywood there, Gary Sinise, Joe Mantegna, and Richard Dreyfuss. Now I want you to think about this. Richard Dreyfuss, of all people, he gave the keynote speech. The guy's a patriot. Now he's left to where I am on a lot of political issues, but he's a patriot, and he believes that what has to happen in the schools, and he's actually started a program to do this, is we have to restore an understanding and appreciation of the Constitution of the United States. This is Richard Dreyfuss, Hollywood. But he has started a foundation to restore an understanding and appreciation of the Constitution and the school systems in Southern California. What we have to do is, first of all, we got to get patriots on the school boards. We got to start monitoring what's being taught in the schools. You see, most of you in here, you have no clue what's being taught in the public schools. But what you'll find when you get into these textbooks is you'll find that the American history has been totally taken out of it. True American history. The price that's been paid for this country and what the Constitution was and who the founding fathers were. Now this is what I do. You do what you want. I actually spend my summers reading about the founding fathers. And if you haven't read it, read the Jefferson Lies, one of our own, Thomas Jefferson. Read about all the lies that have been told about Thomas Jefferson. How many of you still believe he fathered Sally Hemings' son, Thomas? Well, there was a big proclamation, a big announcement in the news that he fathered Sally Hemings, a slave girl's son, Thomas. And everybody in America heard about it. The problem was a week later they came back and said, we made a terrible mistake. It is absolutely certain that he did not. Did you ever hear about that? No. Never heard that, did you? Never heard that. It's because the media controls the message. Read about the founding fathers and read credible authors and understand. If you read about the founding fathers and understand who they were, then you understand better what they were trying to do when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Why was religion, freedom of religion, the First Amendment? The very First Amendment. Because it was so important to them.
Two things. First, for the group here, Common Core is the biggest threat in America to our education system.
Absolutely.
It's coming Thursday night at the Louisa Library, 7 o'clock. We're having Jane Hogan, an authority on that subject, be the main speaker for the evening. You're all invited. You can check our website, louisavateaparty.org, for all the details.
She's a great woman, too.
And she's spoken to us once before on Agenda 21. So she's.
By the way, on that Common Core, I talked to a woman down in Texas the other night when I was in Phoenix, and they are so determined to implement this Common Core, which robs us of all understanding of history and supplants that and replaces that with a very Marxist socialist focus. They are so determined to do it, they're bypassing the school board in the state of Texas and trying to do it. They're trying to get the governor now to do a governor's executive order to stop it.
All right, then my question for Jerry. I know you're an expert and often speaking on Glenn Beck concerning radical Islam. When I talked with you about covering that topic, you chose to cover Marxism. That's great, and we thank you. What would you say, at least, about the Islamic infiltration into the White House?
Well, it's not just the White House, it's the whole government. Listen, let me say very quickly so you understand. First of all, I'm just perplexed by the media, which is saying, now why did these two boys in Boston do this? Duh. They were following the theology of Al-Qaeda. We're not at war against Al-Qaeda. They're only the messenger. We're at war against a 1400-year theology. The good news is this: most Muslims in America don't want anything to do with it. The bad news is this: the only voice in America are those that do want to follow that theology. In 2008, there was a trial in Dallas, Texas called the Holy Land Foundation Trial. They tried 5 defendants on 108 counts of raising money to support terrorism in America. They convicted them on all 108 counts, and they submitted tons and tons of evidence. How many truckloads was it, Steve?
2 truckloads.
2 truckloads of evidence. Now, what's important is not that they convicted these guys, but at the end of the trial, the judge identified a list of unindicted co-conspirators. For any of you that are lawyers, it basically means we got the evidence on you, but we don't have the time or the resources to take you to trial. Now, on that list of unindicted co-conspirators that were tied directly to this thing called the Holy Land Foundation trial that was raising funds to support terrorism, was organizations like the Council of American Islamic Relations, the Islamic Society of North America, the Muslim Student Association, the Islamic Trust of North America. Every major Islamic organization in America in that trial was tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I'll tell you the rest of the story because it hits close to home. When the judge told the Council of American Islamic Relations, I'm not going to take you off that list. In fact, he said, I'm going to make it public, and he did. And I think he got his hand slapped for it, but he made it public. Put it on a government website, didn't he, Steve? So everybody in America could see who the unindicted co-conspirators were. The Council of American Islamic Relations knew that they were going to be the next ones visited by the FBI. So they started taking all their incriminating documents and giving those documents to a young intern, a white boy like me that had converted to Islam. And he was doing a summer internship at Council of American Islamic Relations, so they gave all the documents to him and said, destroy these documents. What they didn't know was that his father was a retired Air Force colonel who lives in Richmond. And David Gabbets. And David Gabbets took all these incriminating documents and went and linked up with a guy named Paul Sperry, an investigative reporter in Washington, and they wrote a book called The Muslim Mafia. It's their documents, it's their words, where they tell how they're going to take over America. And nobody would publish it. Nobody would publish the book. Except Joseph Farah at WorldNet Daily said, I'll publish it. I am not afraid of these people. And he published it. Muslim Mafia, look it up. It came out about 3 years ago. And Joseph Farah immediately got sued. He just won the lawsuit after, 3 years? He just won the lawsuit. This book is incredible, as it lays out in their own words exactly what they're trying to do in America. This is a serious, serious problem.
You mentioned the history of the United States, referencing a gentleman by the name of David Barton, Wall Builders. Can you comment about some of the work that he's done as far as films about our founding father?
David is, how many of you know who David is? Go to Wall Builders, study what he does. David's a good friend of mine. David's brilliant. He's probably the most renowned historian in America on the founding of this nation, and everything that he does is good. And he takes a lot of criticism, a lot of heat. And oh, by the way, in case you don't know, he's listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate monger.
Yes, sir. You mentioned early on about the Second Great Awakening.
Yep.
And we have identified enemy after enemy after enemy. But their true enemy is the forces of darkness, Satan and his minions. And the only way we're really going to win is revival in this land. I think of Balaam and Balak in the Old Testament, when Israel was about ready to go into the Promised Land. It just about wiped out Israel because of the moral corruption. And that was dealt with. Then they went into the land. We're going to have the same luck or lack of luck based on what we do from a moral perspective, from God's perspective. We'll have to have revival in this land. And as a people, turn back to Him and watch Him mop this place up. Well, we're going down. We'll never stand against these people. God, every time Israel falls away from the Lord, they fall. Every time Israel revives, they win. And many times, the army doesn't even bother to go to war. The Lord wins the battle for them. The Lord can win this battle and fight all these people off the face of the planet.
I have been saying for a year and a half that a third great awakening is going to happen. Now here's the key.
Started our church.
Start in my heart.
Yes.
Start in my heart. See, we're in the shape we're in today because of the church. And that is because the church has been asleep and the church is compromised on so many issues. So when people start looking for truth, the place they ought to be able to find it is in the church. And the church is compromised on all the foundational issues in America today. The church doesn't stand on biblical truth. I'm not talking about this church I'm standing in now. But the church as a whole has compromised on all of the biblical issues. So what's got to happen? The church has to turn around. If the church will be the dominant influence in America instead of the ACLU, Code Pink, MoveOn.org, Planned Parenthood, ACORN, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, if the church will reestablish itself as a dominant influence, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen is people of faith have got to get off the pews of the church and get involved in what's going on. They've got to take a stand. The problem is Christians are afraid somebody's going to say something ugly about them. Somebody's going to think they're intolerant. Just how far does tolerance go? What are you tolerating? You're tolerating evil, for goodness sake. But the church is going to wake up. But here's what I'm concerned about. For the church to get to the point where the church finally wakes up, I'm afraid we've got a ways to go. I'm afraid we've got a ways to go. But there will be, call me when this happens, but there will be a third great awakening in America. There will be revival in America. We will not agree on theology. We will not agree on theology. But what we will agree on is the fact that we serve a living God that will honor our prayers. And then when we start to do that and stand on biblical truth, things will start to change in America.
No king but King Jesus, is what he said.
No king but King Jesus. Sir.
I do want to come back to this. I do a lot of reading on radical Islam. Which is our greatest threat as a nation right now, radical Islam or Marxism?
They are working together.
Yes.
They are working together, and each of them sees the other as a useful idiot. Because keep in mind that the theology of Islam is very socialist. If you look at the Nation of Islam, now that's not true Islam, although you don't want to tell him that. The Nation of Islam is based on the theology of James Cone, who was a hardcore Marxist. He taught collective salvation and liberation theology and social justice. That's the Nation of Islam. Well, that's the same thing they teach in Marxism. That's exactly. So they're working together. They're working. That's why we won't face the seriousness of the threat of Islam, is because they're working together. But each one thinks, when we achieve our objectives, we'll dominate the other. So they're working together.
To follow up on that, do you think that Iran will have a nuclear weapon in the next 2 years?
I think Iran has a nuclear weapon already. I don't think that they've yet figured out how to put the warhead on a missile, but I think they've got a nuclear weapon
Or
already.
is it just a matter of time?
Oh,
Because we're not going to do it.
we're not going to do it. We're not going to stop them. We are not going to stop them. Now, I think I'm surprised the Israelis have not already struck. There are no guarantees that the Israelis can stop them, but given the nature of the threat, the Israelis have no option but to try.
Will we
At
back
best,
them
they
up?
can set them back about 3 years.
Will we back them up?
Woe unto us if we don't. It will be the final nail in our coffin if they strike and we don't back them. Now, if you want to know where I stand on Israel, I believe that Israel is the Israel of the Bible. I don't believe that they were replaced by the church. So I respect people's opinion on that. I believe that Israel is the Israel of the Bible. Sir.
Sir, my name is Major Mansfield. I have two questions. One is your thoughts on Ken Cuccinelli for governor. And the other is, have you ever heard of Dr. Glenn Kimber? He is head of the Thomas Jefferson Center for Restoration of the Constitution. Did you hear that? Okay. He has just spent a week here. He has a unique school called the Kimber Academy throughout the country. We have the first one in Hanover here. But he's been here a week. He has talked, made speeches. Many in the room tonight has heard him. Fantastic individual. Knowing he was coming 2 weeks ago, I invited people from our state school education system free. I invited our school board in Hanover. I invited our supervisors. I invited my priest a number of times who happens to be Episcopal. And our primate is on Obama's faith-based initiative in Washington, D.C. Would these people, plus Delegate Peace and McDougal, my senator, would you please stand up if you're here? That's what I thought. Remember that, folks. These people don't care enough to learn from the people who know what's happening to this country. They're afraid to find out. They're trying to protect their own jobs. Now, I've made my little speech. Dr. Kimber will be back in August. So look him up. You, sir, and he have so much in common. He knows Glenn Beck. He's been to Glenn Beck's home. He is fighting for freedom as you are. Get to know him. You make a great team. Now, your thoughts on Kimber? Cuccinelli.
I was, as a matter of fact, I was with some people in his campaign just the other day. And he's been rock solid. He's been rock solid in terms of the values that I share, except there's a question in my mind on one issue. Where's he going to come down on the legalization of marijuana? Because he made a statement over at UVA in terms of his thoughts on that were evolving. Well, that normally means I'm about to change my position. You know, I'm for it before I'm against it, or I'm against it before I'm for it. And that's the one thing that I'm concerned about. But in terms of, I think, you know, traditional American values, I think Ken Cuccinelli has been rock solid. That's right. And I think he's shown a lot of courage. You know, he's disagreed with the governor on some stuff, and he's done so publicly. So I think that he's been solid, and I'm supportive of Cuccinelli, particularly given what the alternative is. I think it's destructive. One more question, if we got one, and we'll wrap it up.
Sir,
Two more questions. Go ahead.
thank you so much for being here today. We are so blessed to have you here.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you. I have 100 questions, and some of which have already been answered. But just for the people who don't have a venue to find out the information that's necessary, Tony Perkins, as well as many others, are on 88.1 American Family Radio, and it is wonderful and great source of information. So I just want to share
5
that
to
with
6
everybody.
every day.
Yes.
We do a live radio broadcast.
Yes, and it is fabulous. Thank you.
So, yes, where will we do? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, I just came back from Israel last week, And actually, I was guided around by a fellow that you may know, Guy Leibovich.
Yeah.
And he sends greetings to
Yeah,
you.
good.
But I just want to say, too, there I saw a t-shirt, and it said, "Don't worry, America, Israel's behind you." They've been fighting this war against the Muslim Brotherhood for many, many years, but they're beginning to also realize that it's the God of Israel that fights for us. And so, gentlemen, that spoke about the Great Awakening. We, as I believe, as the American church, can do notably that when we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, when we bless Israel, the Lord will bless us with that awakening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen. I totally agree with you, sir, and I think that, listen, Genesis 12:3, as far as I am concerned, is very important for us to understand. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Now look, a covenant's a covenant. There's a new covenant, but it didn't abrogate the covenant that was made with Abraham. And I feel very strongly that America's future is tied to how we treat Israel and what we do, whether we stand with them or not. And I can show you, and I just was in Orlando, Florida yesterday doing this. I can show you that God used America as a pathway for fulfilling biblical prophecy. Because on the 14th of May, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood up the library in Tel Aviv and proclaimed sovereignty. That was the beginning of the fulfillment of prophecy. And that never would have happened if it was not for America. And I can go through the whole thing with you. But the fact of the matter was, there were 3 men that said there'll never be a Jewish homeland. A man named Joseph Stalin, a man named Adolf Hitler, and a man named Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Right.
And they all died. And a man that never should have been the President of the United States, in fact, he failed at everything he ever did, a man named Harry Truman, who remembered from his Sunday school lessons in Missouri, that God said he'll call the Jews home. He'll call them home from the north and the south and the east and the west. And Jerusalem will be their capital. 1948 began the fulfillment of that prophecy. It wasn't fulfilled until the 6th of June, 1967, when they went into the old city and they took the old city. And for the first time in 2,000 years, Jews were able to go back and pray at their wall, the most holy site in Judaism. America has been used for the fulfillment of prophecy. That's my sermon for today, and America must stand with it.
Folks, 2 things again.
I'll be signing books back here.
If you want to keep abreast of the good things that the Louisa Tea Party is doing, just monitor our website, louisabateaparty.org. Jerry is going to be signing books in the back. They're $15 for his paperback, $10 for his DVD. I know he's got commitments to get home as soon as he can, but he's good enough to hang in there with us. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you all for coming.